Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's North Carolina Botanical Garden virtual lunchbox talk. We're so glad to have you with us. I'm Joanna Lalikas, the Director of Education at the North Carolina Botanical Garden, and we're excited today to bring you Mary Jack Brennan, who will be sharing with us about native tree fruits, including pawpaws and so many more. So if you live in the area, we hope you will come and visit us. Our gardens are open to the public Tuesday through Sunday. Our exhibit hall, daily plant sale, and our shop are open as well. And Thursdays this summer, we are experimenting with Twilight Thursdays, where we stay open until 8 o'clock. So come by this evening if you want to. We'd like to take a moment to thank our Spring 2021 Lunchbox Talk event hosts, Sims Preston and Olympia Stone. They've been supporting our Spring Lunchbox Talk series at the Dogwood level. Lunchbox Talk event hosts provide funds that support program planning for reaching a broad and diverse audience. And this includes our captioning the recorded talks so that those are available to the public. So we are ready to move forward to presenter introductions. Mary Jack Brennan is a retired North Carolina Cooperative Extension agent who specialized in fruit and vegetable horticulture for 10 years. Mary Jack developed the Community Garden Resource Program and the Urban Farm School while working in Forsyth County. Currently, Mary Jack consults on garden designs, farm management, and community horticulture projects. You can reach her by her email, her Instagram account, and her Twitter account. And we're also talking with Mary Jack about offering an edible native plants workshop later this summer, so stay tuned about that. Mary Jack, thank you for joining us today. I look forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much, Joanna. It's my privilege to be here and very happy to talk about a topic that I care a great deal about. So I'm going to go ahead and get that up and get started. Technology is so great. I'm so glad that I can share this information, and I welcome questions in the Q&A section, and hopefully you'll get something that you can use in your own landscapes. So these are just some shots of some of the native edible fruits that we will be talking about today. And why are we interested in native fruits? Well, there's been such a upsurge in interest in permaculture, and so many people are interested in having natives in their landscapes. Also thinking about organic practices and not having to use so many pesticides. And so our native plants are suited to the conditions that they're growing in when they're found as indigenous plants. And so that does make them, you don't have to use as many pesticides with them, which is great. So here's a list of many of the native edible fruits that would be found growing in the Piedmont region. I'm not going to talk about all of these, but I thought I would just give you that list. Now, there are many, many other native fruits, but they're not necessarily digestible for human beings. And so you can see here, I'm defining edible as a fruit that may be ingested and digested by humans without intestinal distress. So we'll leave it at that. So fruit production, now in the wild, many of these native trees and shrubs are found growing in a little bit shady conditions. They do tend to like moist conditions, although many are adaptable, and I'm going to go through some of the cultural requirements in just a minute. But fruit production is dependent on sunshine, of course, and the more sunshine you have, the more flower production you'll have, which then, you know, you have to have those flowers before you're going to have the fruit. Whether the flowers make it or not through frost is weather dependent. And of course, whether they're pollinated or not is going to be pollinator dependent, could be wind, could be insects. How much water is available is going to affect how much fruit production you get to. And also, if there are a lot of wildlife around, you're probably not going to be harvesting as many as you would like. So let's get started. We're going to start with the aronia, which is also called black choke berry, not to be confused with the choke cherry, which is in the prunus family. So I'm not going to talk about choke cherry today because it tends to have some, there have been cases of poisoning of small children from eating too many of the berries. So I'm not encouraging folks to add that to their landscape. But Aronia melanocarpa is another wonderful choice. It does have these beautiful, shiny blue-black berries that are going to be harvested in August. And we have to remember, you know, we're not the only ones that like the fruit. There are going to be all the critters out there watching for these maturing berries. So you may have to use some bird netting to protect them. These are quite adaptable. They can grow in wet to dry soils and also a wide range of pH, soil pH, and part to full sun, even tolerating some of the environmental stresses that we add to plants, like salty soils and air pollution. Again, this is one that you don't want to be eating the seeds of this. The fruit's not terribly big, and so there are some seeds in there. You don't want to be ingesting those. This is considered a super berry. There's been a lot of interest in some of our super fruits, and this is one of them. You can actually buy this berry powder and add it to your smoothie or other foods. It's just chock full of all kinds of chemicals that are good for you, and minerals and vitamins. It's also pretty, so it's a nice addition to the landscape. You can see it has a shrubby habit of growth, and it has those pretty white flowers. So it is a nice addition to the landscape if you're trying to have an edible landscape. Elderberry is another one of our native edible fruits. There's been a lot of interest in elderberry. You can see the syrup here. This is a North Carolina company that makes this elderberry syrup. This is a member of the honeysuckle family, and it is a large deciduous shrub, and it will produce many root suckers. There are some named cultivars that are going to have more berry production. Adams #1, Adams #2, Johns, Scotia, and York. So again, another superfruit. The flowers are also harvested for tea. There's some liqueurs that are made from elder flowers. And so there's lots and lots of uses. A warning is that the new growth of this plant can cause problems for livestock. And so if you have livestock on your property, you want to make sure that you don't have this growing along the fence edges, because they could, the new growth, if they're chewing on that, it's going to cause intestinal distress for them. Southern crabapple, this is probably one that we sort of forget about because it was an old-time favorite. You'll find a lot of beautiful old southern crabapples, you know, on old farmsteads. It is more of a traditional looking tree and less of a shrubby form. It will begin fruiting at 3 to 4 years, and again, fruits in August to September. And it is, you know, as our urban areas start to spread, we are losing this plant due to habitat loss. Jams and jellies are popular, are very popular, and are made from the crab apples. These are very pretty in the spring, delicate pink blooms. Then you have the interesting fruit, and you'll have a little fall color I remember growing up, we had a neighbor who had one of these in their yard. And of course, we didn't know any better. We would, all the kids in the neighborhood would go. They did not collect their crab apples. And so they would fall on the ground. And of course, we would all pick them up and have crab apple fights. So they're useful for that as well. Red mulberry. This is another one that we probably don't think about as being a desirable fruit sometimes. I think more and more, especially permaculturists, are very interested in this plant. There are other mulberries, but the red mulberry is the one that is native to our area. This is the only native fruit that I would say tends to have some pest problems. It has prolific growth and fruit production. The birds love them. You get a lot of reseeding from the fruit and from birds eating the fruit and planting them all around. And it can, if they're planted over sidewalks, there can be staining, also problems for cars. Unripe fruit is poisonous. So mulberry, you want to prune it. You can control, this one will, it can get a bit out of hand. You can prune it in late winter to avoid the bleeding that will occur if you're pruning it during the active growing times of the year when the plant would be actively growing. Like I said, there are some pest problems with red mulberry. There's a problem with borers, whiteflies, cankers. And so if you are adding this to your landscape, you want to plant it in an area that has good airflow to reduce some of the disease and pest issues. So you want to have, if you've got some breezy areas and you want to give this plant plenty of space to grow so that it will have time, when we have moist conditions, it has time, the leaves can dry out from the wind blowing. It is a good source of iron, vitamin C, E, and K. And again, this is another one that people are very interested in as a superfruit. Native persimmon. This is a member of the ebony family, and it does do best, if you want fruiting, it does best in full sun. These are found all over our woods, and the wood is very, very hard. It's used to be used to make golf clubs, not so much anymore. It's considered a moderate-sized deciduous tree, and it will grow in a wide range of soil types with a pH more similar to what you'd have for a vegetable garden, actually 6 to 6.5, very similar to what apple trees would like as well. These are very difficult to transplant. And so, if you are wanting to add one to your landscape, it's probably best to buy from a nursery, buy a containerized version from a nursery. And if you want to make sure that you are getting a female, you want to make sure that you've had a grafted plant as well. The fruit does ripen after first frost. The fruit will be hanging if you collect it before it's been frosted upon. It's often very astringent. Turn your mouth inside out. But you can make a delicious persimmon pudding from persimmons. Persimmons have absolutely gorgeous fall color. So, adding them to the landscape just for that gorgeous fall color is certainly worth it. American plum. This is a small tree that grows 10 to 20 feet. It does sucker from the ground, and so there'll be thickets that form. It does prefer sandy or loamy soils. Again, this has a very delicate blossom. You'd miss it if you weren't looking for it. If you have it looks very similar to some of the wild cherries and blossoms that you might see in the early spring. The fruit is only about 1 inch in diameter. It is a thick red skinned skin, and it has a yellow meat. And we make jams and jellies from this. It's quite delicious. And then there's the Chickasaw plum, which has very similar growing conditions or cultural requirements for growing conditions. It gets about the same height, maybe a little taller. Again, it forms those thickets. You can remove suckers, but it will naturally send up a bunch of suckers from the ground. This was one that the Native Americans would store up for over the winter. And of course, deer and songbirds love it too. Jams and jellies can be made from this as well. The fruit is a little bit smaller than the American plum, but it does make delicious jams and jellies. So I thought I would ask now about favorite recipes. If any of you out there in the audience are using native fruits now. And while you're answering that, I'll just mention, I do have a recipe for persimmon pudding that I'll be glad to share when we share this, the PDF of this, and the recording of this presentation. And also I have, actually my mother would make the wild plum jam. And oh my goodness, it was delicious, but was it ever a lot of work? Because those little plums was mostly from the Chickasaw plums. They're tiny and the seeds are kind of big. So you had to pick for a long time. And I can remember her getting so excited when we would find a plum thicket so that we could go out and pick plums and she could make her wild plum jam. So it looks like that only 3 of you have used native fruit. So David, can you tell us about what folks have done?
I'm seeing a few results coming in right now. One person makes persimmon pudding and also a Chickasaw plum jam.
Nice.
I'm seeing elderflower liqueur or honey baked into cocktails or made into cakes or pies. Also a recipe for persimmon bread.
Nice.
A lot of jams coming in. Honeysuckle simple syrup. That sounds delicious.
Yeah.
Yes, elderberry syrup on that same wavelength. Well, that's more than 3.
That is more than 3. That's many more than 3. I think I misread that. Okay, great. Well, thank y'all for sharing that. I that would be fun to have some of those recipes. All right, so we will go ahead to, let's talk about pawpaws. So what is a pawpaw? And we have another poll. A special name for grandpa? Another name for a bear claw? The sound of Fido knocking on your door? Or the largest native fruit in the country?
Well, this is a smart group, Mary Jack.
They sure are. Can't pull anything over on them. Have a bunch of pawpaw lovers.
Sure do. I'll go ahead and share these results with you all.
Wow. Oh, I'm glad some people appreciated my humor there. So yes, it is. It is. Another name for a bear claw? Nope. The sound of Fido knocking on your door? D, of course, the largest native fruit in the country. So let's learn about pawpaws. And I just love talking about pawpaws. So here are the statistics about the pawpaw, the Asimina triloba. It is in the custard apple family. It is North America's largest native edible fruit. It's native to 26 states. I'll show you a little map in just a minute. It is not a papaya. So if you do a Google search, which I bet a bunch of you have done, you see when you put pawpaw in, papaya comes up. And that's because Brits often call papaya pawpaw. And so there's anywhere that the Brits were colonizing, you're going to see pawpaw is used for papaya. It is a delicious and nutritious fruit. It used to be very popular. There were many places named for it. What's happened is as we have grown in population and spread out from our cities, we are taking away the home for the pawpaw, and so it's losing habitat. But I have a feeling that there are a bunch of people on this presentation today who will be planting or maybe have already planted pawpaws. So the native has been domesticated. There's been some really great breeding work done, some great cultivars available, and there's a lot of interest. And so you'll find beers made out of it. You'll find pawpaw ice cream. There are festivals. There's a big one in Ohio that they have every year. There's a pawpaw association. So we even had a pawpaw festival in Forsyth County for a while. Many areas, if you were to go look geographically, you'd see many areas in the east are named for the pawpaw. This is the Pawpaw Bends of the Potomac River. Beautiful shot. Here's a map showing the native range of the pawpaw. So you can see it, really covers, even goes over into Texas and Oklahoma, and a little bit into Colorado there. It does have an unusual tropical flavor. I'd say it's a combination between a banana, mango, pear, a little citrusy too, like a pineapple. It has a avocado-like texture. And it has great nutritional value. It actually has a lot of protein in it. It's high for a fruit, about 2%. And you can see it's got lots of minerals in it. It is high in antioxidants, has essential amino acids, and so it's good for our health. Cultural requirements, humid temperate climate, zones 5 to 7, and a moderately acid soil. You can see going up to 7 is neutral, so about 5.5 to 7. If you want optimal fruit yields, you're going to want to give the plant full sun. Now, in a residential planting, if you have some shade, afternoon shade is not bad for pawpaws. You'll still get a lot of fruit production as long as you have, about 6 hours of sunlight. Well-drained soils, all fruit trees are going to need well-drained soils, a deep fertile soil with good organic matter. Also you want to have freedom from competing vegetation. This plant will, and that means it's going to get, it won't have the right structural development, and you won't get fruiting if there are a lot of other trees close by. And if you are using grafted cultivars, you need to protect from wind. We have had some, especially when there's a heavy fruit load, we've had some grafts to break if it's in a windy spot. So if you're planting one, and this is a picture of a relatively young pawpaw tree, fertilization is going to be similar to other fruit trees. Nitrogen is very important early on because it's growing the structure. So basically, you're going to start with about 50 pounds per acre of nitrogen. And once it starts bearing fruit, you will have some extra potassium. And it probably requires higher sulfur and magnesium as well when it starts fruiting. And so you always want to start with the soil test. I wouldn't be a good retired extension agent if I didn't bring that up. And what I recommend to people is select the code for apple as if you're growing apple trees, and you'll get some good recommendations from the state agronomist. and using the NCDA soil testing program. Pruning. So this is a mature orchard of pawpaw up in Kentucky at Kentucky State University. So you really don't have to do a lot of pruning. You will need to train the tree early on to a central leader form, and this is very similar to how we prune apple trees. And so I do have a link here to a bulletin from Extension, North Carolina State Extension, that will tell you how to prune fruit trees. It's not going to tell you how to prune pawpaws, but it'll tell you how to prune apple trees, and you can use that recommendation. You do want to control the height. Pawpaws will get on up 30 feet tall with age. That's like 15, 20 years old. Control the height so that you can pick from the ground. If you have to put ladders up, it's going to start to get hazardous because these fruit are fairly large. The fruit's fairly large. You also want to have open access on all sides. And where it says maintain shade for fruit, that means that you want to have leaf canopy. That's what that means on the tree itself. And it will tend to send up suckers and go clonal, I say. And so you want to keep those suckers pruned out. If you've ever walked along one of the riverbanks in North Carolina, central North Carolina anyway, you have probably seen some pawpaw thickets, and they will get very shrubby-like if those suckers are not pruned out. So let's talk a little bit about insect visitation to the pawpaw. It is a host plant for the zebra swallowtail butterfly, and this is not an economic pest. It's the larvae. Actually, it is the only food for the larvae, and it is the only host plant for the larvae. And so the larvae feed on the young plants. You might see some holes on the leaves, but it's not going to damage. You're still going to have fruit production. Japanese beetle, and so all of this is a picture of that larvae right here. Okay. So Japanese beetles can be a problem when the plant is young, if it's defoliating. The pawpaw peduncle borer, which is right here, could be a problem. It's going to keep you from having fruit. And then the pawpaw leaf roller will make webs. That's what's right here. Will make webs and eat the leaves in the late summer. You'll often have this. So this is the pawpaw fruit. These are some mature fruit, and they do tend to form in these clusters. We'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. You'll often see this black sort of scalding, and you'll maybe see some cracking. All of that, sometimes there's fungus, and we're really not sure whether it's caused by cultural conditions of, you know, it's been dry and then we get a lot of rain and the fruit grows fast, and the cracking happens and then the fungus finds its way there, or is the fungus there and it causes the cracking. So there hasn't been a lot of research on that, but it does all tend to be superficial on the skin only and not cause a problem for the fruit. Sun scald can be a problem too. That's why you want to have the leaf canopy on the tree. Flowering and pollination. So the flowers are perfect, but they're usually not self-fertile. And so we do recommend having 2 or more cultivars required for pollination. These flowers are, the flower parts are way back up in there. And so they are pollinated by flies and beetles. And there's stories or there's notes of back when there was a lot of production commercially of pawpaws, of them hanging dead animals in the trees. to try to attract flies to get better pollination. So we don't recommend that anymore. We recommend planting 2 or more cultivars so that you'll get good pollination. It is a good idea to thin the fruit. This is a young fruit cluster. And if you can imagine all of those, 4 fruits developing, that's going to be a lot of weight on that limb. And so it is a good idea to thin some of that fruit. And so you want to thin to 1 to 2 or 3 fruits. And depending on the cultivar, like Allegheny is one that tends to overbear like this with the fruit clusters. Shenandoah requires very little thinning because it only will develop 1 to 2 fruits per cluster. So how much fruit can you get from a tree? Well, once it's mature, you can expect to get about 30 pounds per tree. With the right kind of fertilization and proper irrigation, and not having a killing frost. These things flower in in Forsyth County around April 15th, which is our average last frost date. So depending on where you are, and we're 7B, we're zone 7B in the Piedmont. So I guess we're considered Northwest Piedmont. And we have an orchard at the Cooperative Extension office in downtown Winston-Salem. And we had 1 year where it was frosted out. But most years, the fruit makes it fine. So here's a little bit, just a reference. There's a man's hand, and that is a fruit, an actual fruit. So ripening season in Forsyth County, we have fruit beginning to ripen by August 15th. And we've got over 30 different cultivars in our orchard, and we will be picking fruit until October 1st. So each tree, it's going to take, you get, an average of, I'd say 2 weeks to 2 to 3 weeks of harvest from each tree. And of course, that's dependent on the cultivar. And if you have room, you may want to have some cultivars that are early ripening, middle ripening, and late ripening, just like you would do for blueberries or apples or any other fruit that you might be growing. So harvest issues, probably one of the things that people have the most difficulty with is, when do you harvest? How do you know when to harvest? And so the hand on the left, the picture on the left with the hand reaching up, they're doing the touch test. And so what I would say, it's not based on the color, because it's gonna, each variety, it's not like, all of a sudden they turn yellow and they're ready. It's more how the flesh feels. And so if the flesh gives a little bit, similar to a ripe peach, it is ready to harvest. If it gets too ripe, they're going to fall off, and the wildlife will gladly take them away for you. They are very fragile and perishable. They don't have a long shelf life. You will have to go out and check them daily. This fruit has the most wonderful bouquet. The fragrance of this ripening fruit is amazing. So it's kind of interesting because the flowers actually smell bad. They have sort of a stinky smell. The fruit has this wonderful fragrance. If you pick it and put it on your counter, it's gonna fragrance your whole kitchen. It's wonderful. So let's talk a little bit about cultivar information. There are a lot of inferior ones. This is according to Neil Peterson, who's done a lot of breeding of some really excellent varieties or cultivars. And a lot of the older cultivars were based very much on your native fruit. So what he's done is he's done a lot of collecting, selecting, and these are going to be varieties or cultivars that consistently fruit and have large fruit and have good taste. So the best of the old ones, according to Neil Peterson, are Overlease, Sunflower, NC1, and Pennsylvania Golden. You might see Wilson, Wells, and Mitchell listed in some of the catalogs or nurseries. He considers them low quality. So, of course, he thinks real highly of his pawpaws, and those would be Wabash, Shenandoah, Allegheny, Susquehanna, Potomac. All of those you're getting 10 to 35 pounds of fruit per tree, and it's tasty fruit. Rappahannock is another one of his. It's not as consistent. Kentucky State University continues to do a lot of research with pawpaws, and I would encourage you to check out their extension website about pawpaws. They have a lot of great information about recipes. They're trying to work on post-harvest handling and, you know, how to actually process the fruit. So they've got some really good selections under observation. KSU Atwood is probably their best cultivar that they've introduced. Some other good ones, and I particularly do like Mango, Green River Belle, and Shawnee Trail. Those are also good cultivars. Good for taste and good for fruit production. So, and let me back up just a minute and talk a little bit about how you process the fruit. So the pawpaw has a number of seeds, the fruit has a number of seeds inside. And although it's shaped and has a texture very similar to an avocado, when you cut it open, you're going to be cutting into seeds. They're fairly large. They're about 3/4 of an inch long and maybe 1/4 of an inch wide. And you may have 10 seeds in one fruit. Usually it's a little less than that in those selected cultivars that I just mentioned. But because it does not have a long shelf life and you're getting a lot of fruit, you need to go ahead and process it. And so you will remove the fruit, you'll peel it, folks have used a tomato processor to actually separate the pulp to pulp out the pulp and separate it from the fruit. And then you can freeze it for use later. So it does take a little bit of work to process it, just like all of these edible native fruits do, because they have seeds. Here's some of the sources. So the NC Botanical Gardens, and I would recommend, if you are interested in, I love supporting the North Carolina Botanical Gardens, and they will have pawpaw trees at their fall sale. Fall or winter is going to be the absolute best time to plant a fruit tree. If you were to plant it now, it's a little bit iffy. You're going to have to stay on top of the water. You know, we've gotten hot really fast, and in Forsyth County, it's been super dry. So I would encourage you to wait for your fruit tree planting for late fall into the winter when the plants are dormant. Other sources, Full of Life Nursery in Chatham County. Wynn Denson has a large orchard there. He sells pawpaw trees, but he also, did I do that? Sorry. He also sells to a lot of the breweries. In North Carolina, so pawpaw beer is absolutely delicious. And then here are some other sources that just to make you aware of those. So this has been my pleasure. I kind of went through that a little quickly. I would be happy to take any questions that there might be, and I'll try my best to answer them.
Yes, thank you so much, Mary Jack. We've got a good number in the chat, so I'll try to get away at those. Lots of questions on pawpaw tree maintenance, so I'll start with some of those.
Okay.
One registrant has seen her pawpaws doing nothing after a few years, and she's been advised to give them bone meal. Is that correct? And what does that do?
Well, bone meal is mostly a phosphorus source, and it's mostly a phosphorus source. So is that person in North Carolina?
That I do not know.
Okay, if you're in North Carolina, you probably don't need to be adding phosphorus because it's fairly fixed in the soils. But what I would recommend to them is to have a soil test, collect a soil sample, get a box from your cooperative extension office and collect a sample according to the directions. You could send it in as a diagnostic sample. So the paperwork that you want to get is called the diagnostic soil sample. There'll be questions on the paperwork for, what's the problem? And you're going to mention that it hasn't fruited. They will turn around that diagnostic soil sample within a week, and you'll get some recommendations. If you were just starting out, I would say send in a soil sample, just your basic soil sample, and put apple tree that you're growing an apple tree. Use that code, and then you'll get the fertilization recommendations based on what your soil pH is, what nutrients already existing in the soil. I would not add bone meal until I had a soil report to look at.
All right, thank you. And how soon or how young should a pawpaw tree be when we can expect to see fruit?
Gosh, I would say about 4 years. Now, if it's a grafted cultivar, 3 years. So now they do like nitrogen early on. And one of the things that we did with our orchard here in Forsyth County is we used fish emulsion fertilizer during the growing season, about every 2 weeks when our trees were young, when they first went in. And they were 2-year-old plants. And they did start fruiting within 4 years. Not heavy loads, but we did get fruit. So make sure, do that soil testing and see what is going on, with your soil chemistry. Because you may need to, they may be hungry. It could be your pH is too low. It could be your pH is too high. Often in North Carolina, it's the pH is too low.
All right. The list of nurseries that you provided, are those good resources to buy southern crab apples and other native fruit trees, or do you have other recommendations for those plants?
They actually are those are good. Yes, they would be good for those other native plants as well. Now, what I will say is nurseries are not producing large quantities of these plants for sale because they're not in huge demand. So, you might want to start perusing nurseries now if you want to plant in the fall. And what I have done in the past is I have bought a liner, a small, very small bare root plant. And when I get it, I pot it up and then I keep it in the pot until I'm ready to plant it out in the field. And I'll do that in the late fall or in the winter.
And At one point you mentioned the pruning. Is it advisable to control the height of all the trees that you've introduced today?
No, not necessarily. Pawpaw fruit is big and heavy. And to think about, climbing a ladder and you're actually picking, some of those fruits weigh half a pound. I mean, they're big. So it's going to be a lot of work. You're going to get tired either going up and down the ladder. So no, the other ones, they tend to be very small fruit. In fact, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but all the others are very small fruit.
So there was a comment in a Facebook group recently about Chickasaw plum and southern crabapple kind of disappearing from the landscape, and where they do still exist, they're not producing much fruit. Harry Legrand said this could be less about habitat loss and more about the large white flowers of Bradford pears attracting pollinators away from the natives. Do you have any thoughts on this?
That's interesting. That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. You remember the slide I showed you, the flowers of both of those plums, well, the plum and the crabapple are small and delicate. And you drive down the interstate and you see the Bradford pear is just naturalized, unfortunately, and that invaded, I should say. So I don't know, that's interesting. I have not seen any data about that, but that would be interesting to read more about that. So thank you for bringing that up. We do want to, the Bradford pear, as it starts to, invade and colonize, it is competing. It's competing for all the resources that the other native fruit trees are needing, and pollinators, water, sunlight. So yeah, it's something to consider.
Another question about pawpaw tree maintenance. One participant has a couple of newly planted pawpaw trees and has experienced the June drop the past couple of weeks. They've had 5 fruits on one tree and 4 on the other, but have lost 2 fruits on one plant. Should this person be reducing their fruit count before June or let the plant handle thinning on its own?
I would recommend try to do the thinning yourself, and what variety was, it might be sort of a varietal habit. As we mentioned, some of those that are heavy bearers, but that's why you do want to do the thinning yourself. And I would do it, go ahead and do it before the June drop so that you can control that.
Okay. There are a couple questions about, so one person has a thicket of pawpaws naturally growing on their acre of woods. Can we expect those to fruit on their own, or do they need to be pruned and suckers be killed? They also have a sunny plot of land, and they're wondering if they should transplant or start a new grove in that more sunny area.
Yeah, the fruit production is going to be very dependent on how much sun those trees are getting. And it could be what usually happens with those naturally occurring thickets is that there'll be fruit that's produced up in the top of the tree, and you don't ever see it until it falls to the ground, and it probably has been stepped on or chewed on by a critter. So I would recommend moving some to the sunnier spot and then controlling the suckers. Soil test, see what you've got in terms of fertility and pH in the site that you're going to move them to, and certainly give it a try. You shouldn't have to prune for fruit production. It's going to be more dependent on the sunlight.
Thank you, Mary Jack.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this question came way back when you were talking about the black chokeberry, so I'm so sorry for making you wait so long for an answer. But is there, so this registrant has Aronia arbustifolia, which is the red chokeberry.
Right.
Is that as good nutritionally for wildlife or in fruit production?
It is for wildlife for sure. Yeah. It's not as desirable for people to eat. But yeah, it's fine for wildlife.
And is there a preparation of chokeberry that reduces ill effects? Or would you just advise not trying to consume it at all?
I think that there are, I mean, it has been used, now you're talking about chokeberry or chokecherry?
This question was about chokeberry.
Okay, chokeberry is, you can, that you actually can, you're going to be fine eating it, just don't eat the seeds. So it was choke cherry that can be fatal to young. There's some cases of young children dying from poisoning after ingesting a lot of the choke cherry.
Right, let's not mix those up then.
Yeah, don't mix those up. So the chokeberry, that's one that's considered a super fruit. And so, you know, I had a picture of a commercially available powder. There are, you know, there's some juices available that have chokeberry in them. So yes, that can be eaten and ingested. Excuse me, that was the word I was looking for.
And could you speak a little bit about root competition and any guidelines you have for separating pawpaw trees, how far apart they should be?
Oh, good question. So in you want them at least 10 feet apart. If you've got space, put them about 15 feet apart. But they will grow, you know, you can manage them about 10 feet apart. They're gonna tend, and the closer you have them, the more pruning you will eventually need to do, because what happens is they will spread where they'll be touching. And it's probably better if you've got space to put them about 15 feet apart and maintain that, so that you've got good airflow and you know, you have access around the tree. As far as root competition, and so you want to put something under it that's not going to, you know, like you could use an orchard grass, you could use just mulch, you could use something like mondo grass. You just don't want something that's going to have deep roots that are going to be competing with it. So that was the point that I was making about competing vegetation. It will tend to send up suckers. Some cultivars, if you're getting these named cultivars, the newer ones, they will be less likely to send up suckers. Often what happens is a fruit will fall and a seed will, you know, sprout. So you're not exactly sure what you're getting when that seed sprouts, if this is from a grafted tree. But generally underneath the trees, you just want to have something that's going to stay very low, and mulch works very well. Just like shredded hardwood bark. If you got your pH right, you could use some, you know, a mix of pine and hardwood. The pine will acidify as it begins to biodegrade.
Well, thank you so much, Mary Jack. We are just about out of time here. If we did not get to your question, we did copy those down. We'll send those to Mary Jack, and hopefully she'll have time to answer those in a follow-up email.
Be glad to do that.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much. What a very smart group.
All right, well, thank you, Mary Jack. We really appreciate you coming and sharing your knowledge and time with us today.
My pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity.